Did they ask you what you were doing, taking mommy out, or?
Yeah, I don't remember what I told them, but they did ask that.
What they say specifically?
It was more of like, what are you doing to mommy?
Okay. Alright. And then the girls, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You mentioned Bella was first? Cece was first, okay. Where exactly was she when it happened?
In the back seat.
Okay. Was she just right next to Bella?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And so once again, was it a hand over her face? Was it?
It was a blanket over and my hand.
And then your hand. Okay. And then so that just stopped her from breathing type thing? Okay. Did she struggle at all?
I don't think so, but I was blocking her face and my hand was right here.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
You had one hand here and one hand over her mouth?
And were you just pushing her against the back of the seat type thing? Okay. What was Bella doing?
She was sitting there next to it. She didn't know what was going on.
Okay. Could she see you? Okay. Tell me about what you were thinking.
I was thinking it's what would happen.
Yeah.
Right, any partial hint of what I feel for those girls and what I feel for my wife, but none of this would have happened, so I wasn't thinking.
Okay. So she's in the back seat. Okay. And then once she's gone, then is it Bella next, or did you pull Cece out?
I pulled Cece out.
Okay, so once Cece's gone, Bella's still there in the car alive, and then you pulled Cece out. What'd you do with her? Okay. So she went into the tank, and Bella was still in the back of the truck alive. Okay. With regard to that tank, did you bring up Cece, put her down, open the hatch?
Brought her up, opened the hatch.
And then put her in. Okay. And then went down to Bella. Tell me what happened there.
She said, what happened to Cece? First she asked, it was the same thing, the exact same thing that happened to me as Cece.
Did she ask you that? Okay. So Bella's pretty smart. How did she sound when she asked you that, Chris?
She had that soft voice she always had.
Yeah. And what exactly did she say?
She said exactly the same thing that happened to me as Cece. And then I said, I don't even remember what I said.
Okay.
I don't know if I just said yes, like a horrible person, or if I just put that blanket over her too and did the same thing.
Same blanket, same way?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
She said, no, Daddy.
It's 11:05 a.m., February 18th, 2019. Inside a sterile interview room at Dodge Correctional Institution, a single camera records a man sitting perfectly still. His orange jumpsuit contrasts sharply with the cold gray walls. A Bible rests beside him. Across the table, 2 FBI agents press record. The man takes a slow breath and begins to speak. His voice is calm, steady, almost gentle, as he starts to describe how he killed his wife, then his daughters. Every word lands like a blade. Every pause feels heavier than the last. To the world, he was once the picture of family devotion, an affectionate husband, a loving father, the dependable neighbor next door. But within minutes, that image collapses. He speaks of the morning of August 13, 2018, as though recounting a routine. He explains how he carried out each act with methodical precision, his tone more fitting for a grocery list than the recounting of 3 lives taken. The agents exchange quiet glances, unsure whether they're listening to confession or calculation. The man across from them is Christopher Watts, and this is the story he chose to tell. The details are known to many, the missing wife, the televised plea, the shocking confession, but the meaning behind them remains fractured. What transforms a quiet husband into a killer? How can someone's need for control outweigh their capacity for love? And why does he speak of forgiveness as if it redeems what was done? As the camera keeps rolling, we begin not with the moment of death, but with the illusion of life, the carefully built story of a family that seemed untouched by chaos. Because understanding what he destroyed requires understanding what he once had. Before we begin, take a moment to subscribe, like, and share this story. Each click helps us keep bringing you real stories that matter, the ones that force us to ask the hardest questions about the human heart. Where are you watching from tonight? Let us know in the comments below, we read them all. And to every supporter who keeps this channel alive, thank you. Your engagement allows us to dig deeper, to uncover truths others overlook, and to tell stories that stay with you long after the screen fades to black. Now, let's return to that quiet Colorado morning where everything began. In the summer of 2018, the small town of Frederick, Colorado, looked like a snapshot of peace. Rows of pastel homes lined Saratoga Trail, lawns trimmed, American flags swaying gently in the breeze. It was the kind of neighborhood where everyone waved when you drove by, where trust wasn't questioned, and danger seemed to belong somewhere else. Within one of those houses lived a family that seemed to embody everything America celebrated: prosperity, love, and faith. Shannon Watts, a 34-year-old mother, businesswoman, and soon-to-be mother of 3, poured her energy into building a perfect home and image. She was vibrant, driven, and deeply devoted to her family. Through her phone, she shared the highlights of her life with the world, videos of laughter, of her daughters running into their father's arms, of dinners shared with smiles and soft music in the background. To her friends and followers, she was a woman who had everything: a loving husband, 2 healthy children, and another baby boy on the way. Chris Watts appeared to be the steady force behind it all. At 33, he was soft-spoken, polite, and well-liked by everyone who knew him. A mechanic at Anadarko Petroleum, he blended seamlessly into the rhythm of suburban life. "He's one of the good ones," a coworker once said. He rarely raised his voice, never caused trouble, and always seemed content to play the role of the quiet husband who adored his family. But even in the warmest light, shadows can grow unnoticed. While Shannon posted videos of affection and encouragement, Chris began to retreat into silence. He lost weight, started dressing differently, and began spending more time at the gym. His co-workers thought it was self-improvement, his wife thought it was distance. In June of that year, Shannon noticed the change. Her text messages became a mix of worry and hope, pleas for reassurance, questions about where his heart was. "I don't feel like you're in this with me anymore," she wrote one night after he fell asleep early. "I love you, but something's wrong." Chris replied hours later with, "I'm sorry you feel that way. I've just had a lot on my mind." But what was on his mind wasn't work, or stress, or fatherhood, it was another woman. At the same time Shannon planned for their future, a gender reveal party, a new house project, another family trip, Chris was exchanging messages with Nicole Kessinger, a coworker he had met just months earlier. Their relationship began as casual conversation and quickly escalated into secret dates, shared photos, and late-night calls that stretched until dawn. To Nicole, he was a man trapped in an unhappy marriage, trying to find himself again. To Shannon, he was slipping away, but she couldn't understand why. "I'm scared you're pulling away because of the baby," she told him during a phone call from North Carolina, where she was visiting family. He responded with silence, then whispered, "I just need space." By August, that space had turned into something colder. Shannon confided in friends that she felt alone, saying, "I'm trying everything, but he doesn't talk to me anymore." Friends noticed the tension in her messages, moments of affection followed by desperation, her optimism fighting to keep something alive that was already dying. Chris, meanwhile, told Nicole he was ready for a new life, and that the marriage was over. She didn't know he was lying to both of them. The night of August 12th, Shannon returned from her business trip, exhausted but relieved to be home. Security cameras captured her arriving at 1:48 a.m., carrying her suitcase through the front door. Her friend Nicole would later say she looked happy to be back, unaware it would be the last time anyone saw her alive. In the days ahead, every image of the Watts family would be replayed by millions of viewers around the world, each smile dissected, each gesture questioned, as if the answer to what came next was hidden in plain sight. But in that quiet moment, under the glow of the porch light, there were no screams, no police, no suspicion. Just a woman coming home to the life she believed in, and a husband standing at the edge of a decision that would change everything. Because in less than 8 hours, that perfect home would turn silent. The laughter would stop, and the man everyone thought they knew would become someone they could never understand. At 8:30 a.m. on August 13, 2018, the quiet streets of Frederick were interrupted by a single unanswered text. Nicole Atkinson, Shanann's close friend, had been expecting to hear from her that morning. They had plans to review business calls, but Shanann, who was always punctual, was unusually silent. Calls went straight to voicemail. Messages marked "delivered" never turned blue. Hours passed, and Nicole's concern turned to dread. She drove to the Watts home, a 2-story house that now felt unusually still. Shanann's car was in the driveway. Her shoes were by the door. But no one came to answer the bell. "Something's wrong," she told the 911 dispatcher. "My friend's pregnant. She's not answering. And her car's here." At 1:40 p.m., Officer Scott Coonrod of the Frederick Police Department arrived at 2825 Saratoga Trail. His body camera recorded every second, the moment he knocked, the silence that followed, the doorbell that went unanswered. Minutes later, Chris Watts pulled into the driveway, hands in his pockets, expression unreadable. "Hey, what's going on?" he asked, his voice calm but oddly detached. He explained that Shanann had gone to a friend's house. When asked which friend, he paused, then said, "I'm not sure which one." The officer's camera followed him inside. There was no sign of struggle, no overturned furniture, no broken glass. But the signs of life were gone. Shanann's phone was on the couch, her purse in the kitchen, her medication still in its container. It was as if she had simply vanished mid-morning. On the footage, Chris walks from room to room, pointing at blankets and beds as if narrating a tour of normalcy. "That's where the girls sleep," he says softly. "They were just here." But something about his tone unsettles the officers. It's too rehearsed, too casual. When Nicole mentions that Shanann never went anywhere without her phone, the silence tightens. Watts shrugs, saying, "Maybe she took off. Maybe she needed space." By evening, the search widened. The FBI and Colorado Bureau of Investigation joined local police. Drones scanned nearby fields. Neighbors replayed security footage. One camera from across the street captured Chris backing his truck into the garage at 5:27 a.m., something he had never done before. Investigators took note. That night, as news stations picked up the story, Chris stood in front of cameras, hands clasped, eyes flat. "Shanann, Bella, Celeste, if you're out there, just come back," he pleaded. "This house isn't the same without you." But the footage showed no tears, no urgency, just an eerie steadiness. Viewers across the country watched and wondered how a man could look so calm in the face of such loss. Behind the scenes, investigators were already noticing cracks. The sheets on the master bed were missing. A trash can in the kitchen contained a sheet that matched the set. The GPS from Chris's truck showed an early morning stop at an oil field owned by his company. But there was still no physical evidence of a crime, only unease, the growing sense that something was terribly wrong. That evening, Nicole's voice cracked as she spoke to reporters outside the house. She would never just leave her babies, she said. She loved them too much. As police cars lined the street and neighbors gathered on sidewalks, the small town that once prided itself on peace now held its breath. The next morning, the Watts home was declared a potential crime scene. The American dream that had once been broadcast through Shanann's social media now stood as a backdrop to one of the most haunting mysteries in modern true crime. Inside, nothing was broken. No doors forced. No signs of violence. Just silence, the kind that doesn't comfort, but questions. Because somewhere in that silence, buried beneath routine and denial, was the truth. And when it finally surfaced, it would reveal not a disappearance, but a deception so cold it would stun the world. By August 14, 2018, the illusion of innocence began to unravel. Detectives from the Frederick Police Department invited Chris Watts to headquarters for a voluntary interview. He agreed immediately, his calm demeanor unchanged. Inside the room, Detective Tammy Lee sat across from him, voice soft but direct. "Chris," she said, "help us understand. What happened in that house?" He leaned forward, hands clasped tightly. "I don't know where they are," he insisted. "I just want them home." But his story shifted with each retelling. One moment, Shannon was sleeping when he left. The next, she was up and emotional. Each inconsistency was small, but they added up, like hairline cracks in a mask that could no longer hold. That same day, investigators discovered new footage from the neighbor's security camera. It showed Chris's truck backing into his garage at 5:27 a.m. and staying there for nearly an hour before he left for work. The neighbor, Nate Trina Stick, played the video repeatedly for police, pointing out the unusual behavior. "He never does that," Nate said, his tone uneasy. "Something's off." As the clip replayed, Watts stood beside them, watching himself on the screen. His arms crossed. His eyes fixed forward. "I didn't do anything," he said flatly. When Watts finally left, Nate turned to the officer and whispered, "He's not acting right." That moment would mark the turning point. Over the next 24 hours, the investigation moved quickly. Cadaver dogs were brought into the home. The scent alerts came near the master bedroom and in the garage. A neighbor reported hearing muffled noises early that morning, but nothing she could clearly identify. As the data poured in, cell phone pings, text histories, security footage, patterns emerged that didn't match Watts's story. His phone, once active through the night, showed a sudden gap between 4 o'clock and 6 a.m. His wife's phone, found in the house, never moved after 2 a.m. Detectives began to suspect that the disappearance wasn't a mystery, it was a cover-up. The following day, Watts returned to the police station for another round of questioning. This time, the tone shifted. He was asked to take a polygraph test. Smiling faintly, he agreed. "I'll take one. I've got nothing to hide." The examiner, sensing his confidence, told him, "Chris, we'll know if you're lying." He nodded. Hours later, after the test concluded, the examiner entered the room again. "Chris," she said gently, "you did not pass that test." Silence filled the air. He looked down, breathing heavily, then whispered, "Can I just talk to my dad?" When his father, Ronnie Watts, entered the room, Chris finally cracked. The camera recorded every word. He began by shifting blame. "After I told her I wanted a separation, Shannon, she hurt the girls," he said, voice trembling. "Then I lost it." The confession was partial, deliberate, and false. Investigators knew it instantly. They let him speak, watching the way his eyes darted, the way his breathing slowed. Behind the mirror, FBI agents listened closely. The truth was close, he just wasn't ready to say it. As the interrogation ended, Watts was placed under arrest for suspicion of murder. His demeanor changed again, no emotion, no resistance. Neighbors who once described him as quiet and polite now used words like cold and distant. Shannon's family, still clinging to hope, received the call that shattered it. Her father sobbed into the phone, saying only, "He did it, didn't he?" Outside, the media gathered in the fading Colorado sun. Reporters stood in front of the Watts home, cameras rolling as officers sealed the driveway with crime scene tape. And as dusk fell over the once peaceful neighborhood, America watched a story that had begun as a disappearance transform into something far more disturbing. Because the confession Chris gave was only half the truth. The rest. The full horror of what happened to Shannon, Bella, and Celeste, was still waiting to be told. February 18, 2019. 6 months after the murders, Christopher Watts sits in a narrow gray room inside Dodge Correctional Institution in Waupun, Wisconsin. Across the table are FBI agents Coder and Lee, along with a Colorado Bureau of Investigation officer. They've come to ask the question that still haunts the case: why? Watts has already pleaded guilty. He's been sentenced to 5 life terms without parole. He has nothing left to lose. Still, the agents want to know what truly happened that morning, the part that was never spoken in court. Watts lowers his eyes, folds his hands, and says quietly, "I'll tell you everything." The room stills. The camera light turns red. He begins in fragments. The night before the murders, Shannon had returned home from a business trip around 1:48 a.m. He says she was exhausted, emotional, and that they talked about their failing marriage. "She told me she couldn't do it anymore," he recalls, staring down. "I told her I didn't want the baby." The agents exchange looks. This was the first time he admitted rejecting the child. "Then what?" one asks. Watts swallows. "She said I'd never see the kids again." There's a long pause. "That's when I put my hands around her neck." The words hang in the air. He doesn't cry. He doesn't tremble. He simply recounts each step with unsettling precision. He tells them how she fought, how her body struggled for air. She didn't yell. She just said, "Chris, no." When it was over, he sat beside her, staring into nothing. He claims he didn't plan it. "It just happened," he says, repeating the phrase as if trying to convince himself. But investigators know that in the days before, he told his mistress he was free, and that his family was gone. The premeditation was written in his texts. Then comes the part that breaks even the most seasoned agents. "The girls woke up," he says. "Bella asked what was wrong with Mommy." His voice tightens for the first time. "I told them she wasn't feeling well." He wrapped Shannon in a bedsheet, carried her down the stairs, and placed her in the back of his work truck. Bella and Celeste followed, still in their pajamas, clutching blankets. He drove 45 minutes north to an oil site owned by Anadarko Petroleum, the same one his GPS had traced the morning of August 13. Along the way, he says, they fell asleep in the back seat. When the truck stopped, the sun was rising over Weld County. He dug a shallow grave and laid Shannon's body inside. He tells the agents how he stood there for a moment, silent, before returning to the truck. Celeste was sitting there, he says. She had a little blanket with unicorns on it. Then, without emotion, he admits to suffocating her with that blanket. She didn't fight, he adds, his tone eerily calm. She just fell asleep. When asked about Bella, he takes a long breath. She watched, he whispers. She said, "Daddy, no." Those were her last words. He placed her body into a nearby oil tank, explaining, "I thought they'd never be found there." For nearly 5 hours, Watts continues, methodical, detached, answering every question as though reliving a schedule. He says he buried Shannon's body because she deserved to be laid to rest, yet describes disposing of his daughters with no emotion. Agent Coder finally leans forward. "Why tell us now?" Watts replies, "Because I found God. He's forgiven me, and I need to come clean." His Bible sits on the table, the pages folded to Psalm 51, "Wash me thoroughly from mine iniquity, and cleanse me from my sin." But the agents don't see redemption, they see control. Even now, Watts chooses how much to reveal, how to frame his story. They note his tendency to minimize, to shift tone from remorseful to rational. One of them asks, "Did you ever love them?" He hesitates, then nods. "I did," he says. "I still do." Then, after a long silence, "I don't know who I was that morning." When the interview ends, Watts thanks them for listening. The agents pack their files, their faces drained. As they leave, one murmurs, "That's the coldest man I've ever met." Outside the prison, snow drifts across the Wisconsin air. Somewhere far away, in a small cemetery in North Carolina, Shanann and her daughters rest beneath white marble stones engraved with their names. Visitors leave flowers, stuffed animals, and handwritten notes that say, "We remember you." What happened inside that home will always defy explanation. But what chills investigators most isn't just what he did, it's how easily he spoke about it. Because even after the truth came out, Chris Watts wasn't finished talking. What he said next, and what he claimed to feel, would divide the nation between those who believed in forgiveness and those who could never accept it. In November 2018, Christopher Watts was transferred to Dodge Correctional Institution in Wisconsin to begin serving 5 life sentences without the possibility of parole. The courtroom in Weld County had been silent when the judge handed down his punishment, calling the murders the most inhumane and vicious crimes I have ever seen. Shanann's family sat motionless, their grief too deep for words. Her father, Frank Rzusek, looked directly at Watts and said, "You took the lives of my daughter and grandchildren, and you still smile." For the first time, Watts lowered his head, not in sorrow, but as if to hide from the weight of what he had become. In prison, his days were reduced to routine: wake, eat, work, pray, sleep. But the story did not end with confinement. From behind bars, he began corresponding with strangers, people fascinated by his calmness, his faith, his claim of redemption. "God has forgiven me," he wrote in one letter to a supporter. "I've accepted Christ. I am free on the inside." The public response was divided. Some saw manipulation, others saw delusion. Those who studied criminal psychology called it the narcissistic reconstruction, the way killers rewrite their own stories to fit the image they want remembered. Investigators who had sat across from him believed the same. "He's rewriting history," Agent Tammy Lee later said. "He doesn't feel remorse, he feels relief that he finally got to live the life he wanted, for a moment." Yet in those letters, Watts painted a different version of events. He wrote that he was tormented by nightmares of his daughters. "I hear Bella's voice in my dreams," one letter read. "She's saying, 'Daddy, why?'" Whether truth or performance, those words reignited public debate. Could someone capable of such violence ever feel guilt deep enough to change them? Inmates described him as quiet, polite, and obsessed with the Bible. He avoided attention, rarely spoke unless spoken to, and spent hours writing and praying. Guards said he sometimes cried at night, whispering prayers too softly to understand. Others dismissed it as self-pity. "He wants people to see him as reborn," one officer remarked. But rebirth doesn't erase what he did. Theologians were asked to weigh in on national news networks. Some said forgiveness was divine, others said it was impossible without true repentance. Meanwhile, Shanann's parents refused to accept his narrative of spiritual freedom. "He doesn't deserve peace," her mother said during an interview. "He didn't just take their lives, he destroyed generations of ours." Even from prison, the fascination around Watts never faded. True crime enthusiasts dissected every word of his interviews, every inconsistency in his timeline, every subtle manipulation in his letters. Some saw in him a rare glimpse into the emptiness of human empathy, a man who could describe unspeakable acts without emotion, yet quote scripture with conviction. Others saw a warning, that evil doesn't always appear violent or monstrous, but can wear the face of ordinary love until the mask slips. As 2019 came to a close, rumors began to circulate from inside the prison. Inmates claimed to hear him talking to his family late at night, whispering names no one else could hear. Guards dismissed it as guilt. Others weren't so sure. A few even refused to enter his cell during late rounds. "It feels heavy in there," one said quietly. "Like something still lingers." Because while the world believed the story had ended with his confession, new reports suggested otherwise. Unexplained sounds, eerie recordings, and what some called the haunting of the Watts case, were beginning to surface, raising one final question no one was ready to ask: did guilt stay locked behind bars, or did something follow him home? The Watts house still stands, empty, untouched, and heavy with memory. The laughter that once filled its rooms is long gone, but the silence hasn't faded. For many, the case ended with justice. For others, it never truly ended at all. Some say the past lingers there, not as ghosts, but as reminders of how easily love can be destroyed by deceit. Before you leave, take a moment to like, share, and subscribe. Tell us where you're watching from tonight, and thank you for keeping these stories alive. Your support helps us continue searching for truth, even in its darkest corners. Because some crimes end in court, but their echoes never really stop.